What is up, everybody? Welcome to another Tech Thursday. My name is Jonathan Price. Thank you for joining me, and we're going to jump right into it. So, actually, before we do, I want to apologize because last week's recording was actually brought to my attention that I did something stupid, and I recorded it in mono. And I was like, what in the world? I know this recorded in stereo. So I went back and I tried to figure out everything that was going on software-wise. And just out of pure frustration, I was like, okay, I'm just going to not do this, and we're just going to forget it, just do it in mono. And so I went to plug in my headphones, and so because headphones are in stereo, I went in to plug in my headphone and realized that my headphone jack wasn't pushed in all the way, therefore creating a mono signal. So I was both really mad and felt quite the fool. So hopefully you guys can get a good chuckle out of that. I know I did after I figured out what was going on. Okay, so the last couple of weeks we have been talking about this wheel of emotion. And the first week we did an overview, and you can go back and watch that. We did an overview of all of these different emotions and how music is used to create different emotions. And 2 weeks ago we did Surprised, and we talked about how to create that surprised sound. So whether you're excited or amazed, confused, and then moving into these little ones. And then last week we did Bad, which was tired, stressed, busy, bored. We had apathetic, out of control, unfocused, and we talked about the ability to use the third and how important that third is to either use or not to use. And as we move into today, the same thing can kind of be said for the third, except that the absence of it creates more of what we're going for. Now, this video is going to be quite a bit shorter because when you think about what is fearful and what creates fear, what is fear? Well, we have all these buzzwords. We'll just go through them quickly. Scared, anxious, insecure, weak, rejected, threatened, exposed, nervous, persecuted, excluded, insignificant, worthless, inferior, inadequate, worried, overwhelmed, frightened, and helpless. So all of these words funnel down into these larger categories, which funnel down into this one word, fearful. And if we break down the word fearful and we really think of what it is, it's not, well, I'm afraid of hula hoops. I'm afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of ... Well, why are you afraid of that thing? And when you break it down into the absolute most basic nature of what fear is, it's really something that's unknown. So fear equals unknown. Because how many times have you guys been doing something, or you've gone to a director and say, well, I have no idea if they're going to like this. There is a fear of them rejecting it, or a fear of them saying no, or a fear of, insert whatever your fear particular is. So once you realize, so it's kind of like when you've watched a scary movie before, it's not really scary the second time because you know what's going to happen. So if there's like someone pops out from behind the door, or a guy goes to the refrigerator and then closes the refrigerator door and someone is there ready to stab him, that doesn't have the same effect except once. And so it's a fear with the unknown. It's not a fear of the unknown. It's that unknown thing that is making it hard for us to accept what is going to be, I guess, if that makes sense. So a fear of XYZ is actually something that is unknown. I have no idea what's going to happen when I get in the car today. I have no idea what's going to happen when I make this video. I have no idea what's going to happen when I make this pitch. That creates an anxiousness, an insecurity, a weakness. We're going to feel rejected. We'll feel threatened, helpless, you name it. And all of these words funnel down into the fact that something is unknown to us. And once it becomes known, it becomes less fearful. Just like when you were a kid and you had your mom or dad in the pool and they told you for the first time to jump in the pool, jump, I'll catch you. And you're like, no, I don't trust you. I'm too afraid to do this. This is ridiculous. And once you got over that fear of the unknown as to what was actually going to happen, and you knew that your mom or dad were going to catch you, then all of a sudden you want to do it over and over and over and over and over again. So that's the same thing that we as composers are trying to figure out. Okay, so when they watch this movie a million times, what is it going to be that's going to, at least in some way, shape, or form, give them that sense over and over and over again? Now, that's the frustrating thing about fear music and horror music, is that it only does it once. You can only have fear one time, unless that fear is so debilitating that you're so afraid of that thing happening that you're never going to try it again. So that's just something that you as an individual has to get over in just general everyday life. So sorry I went on that little bit of a tangent. Let's get into music. Okay, when I say something like fear and being scared only happens once in music, it's such a bummer, because you can only scare somebody one time in a film, because the next time they know it's there, it's going to be there. You can only you can't scare them more than twice, really, with that same film, with that same music, or anything like that. It's hard to make yourself feel scared. However, things like happy, bad, angry, disgusted, sad, and happy, these 6 are things that you can feel over and over and over and over and over and over again with the same movie all the time, which is interesting if you kind of think about it. Take the Scream series, or I'm not a big horror movie buff, but one of my favorite ones was 13 Ghosts. And you watch it one time and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm not scared anymore. It's kind of that thing. So let's talk about writing fear music. This has a whole huge range of emotions. So things like we have to get out of the fear itself. Then we have to dive into each one of these individually, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to kind of do overview. So we'll talk about up here the helpless, frightened, overwhelmed, worried, inadequate. This is going to be a lot of the minor sounding, very cliche. Sorry, let me get rid of this here. So just know that if you want to download this and you kind of have it up in the background, I'm just going to kind of go through and we'll talk about some of these things so you can see what I'm doing. So we have these anxious sounds. We have these uncertain. Let me just helpless, frightened, overwhelmed, worried, inadequate, inferior, worthless. I'm trying to get in my own frame of mind. So if I just start with a C minor chord, I just play on this for a second. Letting this just play out and just play simple rhythm is enough to get that not really anxious feeling, but that worried, kind of fearful, dread, and what have you. It's when you start adding layered chords. So if I move my right hand to an F minor in first position, the C minor still on the bass, or I can get rid of the E flat. Oh, something changed. Okay, so now we went from this fearful to whoops, where'd it go? Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to close it all the way. Helpless. You have this. Let me minimize this a little bit. There we go. Now you can see what's going on. We have helpless. Little birdie is caught in a tree and doesn't know how to fly. something stupid like that, right? Okay. Frightened. Frightened, we can kind of go a little bit of a different direction because it's something completely different than helpless. If you are talking about it from, you have two different types of frightened. You have frantic frightened, that something is chasing me, I'm scared out of my mind, versus I am emotionally scared, I'm emotionally frightened, something terrifying is happening, my wife has cancer, my husband was in a bad car accident, yada yada yada, XYZ. You can do a whole lot of things. What I like to do for these types of depending on the cue, I'm going to go emotional first, is having something low that's not giving away what the actual chord is. So if I play, so right now I'm playing a C open, C, G, C, fifths, or even octaves work really well. Now this is a lot, you can get a lot of mileage out of single notes, especially when it comes to things like synth. So I'm going to go down to this, my Night Stalker synth, and this is one of those that I love. I absolutely love for intense emotional scoring. And so here's what it sounds like. So if you let that just kind of rumble out, just that unknown of where it's going to go is enough to get you a little bit frightened, especially when you're watching a film. And then you have composers who are very methodical in their playing when it comes to writing film music, and for this type of genre. So for that fear and either horror or psychological thriller or things like that. And I've known some composers who will really think about it and who will really try to what notes make the best, and then I've also, or make the best feeling. And then I've also heard composers just start playing around with stupid stuff. So I'm going to do a little bit of that. So you have things like that. Now, if you're kind of wondering, well, how did you make those pitches decay without? So one of the techniques that you can use, and this is if you're a piano player, you're going to get this right away. But if you're not, using the sustain pedal as part of your dynamic and part of your ability to bring notes in and out is something that's absolutely crucial. So if I just hold down, one thing you can do is hold down on your keyboard and then never let it go while using the sustain pedal for your melodic moving notes. So if I hold down the sustain pedal, I play the A flat that I played originally, let go, and then slowly release the sustain pedal, activate sustain pedal, slowly release, still on G. It kind of makes it sound like it's fading out. So a lot of those are, some of those tricks and tips are kind of, I guess, impulse, or whatever patch you have available. That's just some of the things that I like to use for synths if I'm trying to create, like, it's got a lot of really cool low end stuff. And this patch has a lot of nice high scratchy things that can bring out that frightened, overwhelmed, and worried, anxious type of sound, which I really, really love. So there's that side of the wheel. So let's move into this little middle bit here. We have insecure, weak, and these kind of go into inadequate, inferior, worthless, insignificant. So this is something that is very much internal, and we're going from external to internal forces and internal fears. So let's go back and let's talk about, I'll pull this back up. So we have inferior, worthless, significant. So a lot of you guys, you have to give the audience what they're wanting. You have to give them that anchor. You have to give them the cliche, if you will. So the whole "oh, woe is me" kind of thing. Something like that. Okay. Inadequate, inferior. So a lot of these are going to come with melodies. So let's write a melody here. I like C minor a lot. That's one of my favorite keys, so I'm not going to do that. Let's go G minor. I like this one. So in G minor we have, right? So we have the B flat, E flat. Okay, let's do a melody. So let's do something inadequate, inferior, worthless, and insignificant. We want to make these people feel really small. We're bullying people, and as a composer, you kind of have to think like that. If you have to think from both people's perspectives. So I kind of like to use both hands as different characters, and this may be a little much to think of, and when I'm actually writing in the process of it, I'm not thinking, okay, the left hand is going to be the bully and the right hand is going to be the bullied, and I don't typically think like that. It just kind of plays out that way. So let's enough chat. Something like that. Okay, retarded. I know. Things like that, and if you orchestrate it with a nice string bed, you get these nice big lush. Kind of something like that. Okay, I hope that makes sense. A lot of this stuff, and we'll talk into, I'm going to get more into the horror aspect of this in just a second, but if you notice, we're going from external fear sources to internal fear sources. So now we have exposed, nervous, persecuted, and excluded. Sorry, 1 second, hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, so when we have these excluded, persecuted, nervous, these rejected and threatened kind of things, you've got to think of there's going to be a lot of dialogue, and if there's not a lot of dialogue, you're going to have a scene where let's just paint a picture of a guy who let's just say a guy who lost his girlfriend, and he comes home and is he's a little distraught. He's very quiet, he's somber, he's nervous, he's exposed. Maybe he just tried to propose to his girlfriend and she said no, and they had a big falling out and he left. really sad and rejected. And so there's an internal feeling of despair and wanting to kind of protect yourself. And we've kind of been in those situations in our personal lives when we feel like we need to protect ourselves, we kind of close up. We get really small. We want to wrap ourselves in a blanket, or I'm the kind of guy who likes to go shooting. So I'll go to the gun range and I'll just kind of internalize everything and focus. And it's a good way for me to focus. So if I think of something close and I think of something that's super internal, I think really close voicings. The more fear you have externally, the wider the range. So you have like horror music a lot uses extreme octaves and sometimes single notes. So you have anything from like that. What's that? There it is. Right, it starts on a low drone, I think. Okay, so you have things like that. When you do the intimate stuff and you are very close, you're nervous, you're excluded, these are all internal things that maybe you're the only person who feels that in that particular instance. So we get really close. So we get now you can orchestrate that really wide and still maintain the integrity of it, and just you keep the melody really small. Even something simple like that, where we have right? So that kind of has that nervous and exposed. You feel open, you feel wounded. If you've ever told somebody that you love them and they didn't say it back, it's kind of an exposing feeling. If you have never done that, man, I hope it never happens to you. But better to love and not be loved than to never. I totally butchered that. Anyway, better to have loved and lost than to never loved at all. That's it. There we go. Okay. All right. So let's get into a little bit of the horror stuff. The horror stuff, like I said at the beginning, is kind of like a one-trick pony. It does it really, 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 really well the first time, and then it just it may do it really well the second time, but it doesn't get you the second time. So things like hits and stingers and dives and things like that are obviously super helpful to getting that person to feel that fear. You don't usually go see a horror movie more than once or twice for the fear factor itself. Maybe it was a fantastic movie and you like the storyline and the plot and the cinema and like everything else that goes into it, but it won't scare you the same as it did before. And if it does, then you aren't paying attention to the movie, which is hilarious in and of itself. So if when you're composing things, having these nice widespread chords, Cluster chords are huge too. Sometimes I call these the working lunch, where you where you work you set the sustain pedal and you put something over it, like a piece of duct tape, or you duct tape it down, and you just kind of hit something and just let it kind of ring out, and then you start just leave them down, let them do their thing. So now you have no idea what the hell's going on, which is pretty funny. It can add a lot to a good scene. Another thing that I like to use is this library, Rise and Hit from Native Instruments. It's a really sweet library, especially for basically for anything that needs accent. So closing scenes, end of action sequences, beginning of action sequences. They have some nice reverse stuff that's in there. So this is one of my favorites that I use. This Burst to Not kind of has that reverse effect that has a nice stop and a great tail. So if you haven't invested in this library, I'd highly suggest it. So things like that are great for horror, especially when you have like like I mentioned earlier, the guy at the refrigerator. He opens it, gets out a yogurt, closes the refrigerator, and all of a sudden, I wouldn't use this one particularly, but close the door, there he is, kind of thing. So you get away with kind of stuff like that. Another thing that is really helpful to use for fear and frightening and more of that horror type are pulses and tic-tac kind of things, where you have this one's got a reverse filter on it. This is from Signal, called Attenuate, I guess. Okay, so there's a lot of really cool preset stuff. Now, if you are into that sound design, I don't have time to do the sound design stuff, so a lot of the stuff I use is preset, and then I'll kind of manipulate some of the filters and stuff if I need to. But a lot of that kind of stuff is hugely beneficial if you know how to use it. So if you're doing your sound design stuff and you know how to use all the filters and all the arpeggiators and gates and reverses and you name it, whatever it is that you know how to use, that's fantastic. So if you're, for all of those of you who are UHE like Zebra fans, man, that is one hell of a library and a hell of an engine for creating those types of sounds. I know Zimmer, he uses that thing a ton. And so if you guys are interested in that, invest and get some. And it's called UHE, U-HE, and it's a sick program, sick synthesizer. So get that. So I hope that was helpful. As I close up this week, keep in mind that a lot of the audiences are going to be you want to spoon feed them. You want to spoon feed them surprised, bad, and fearful. And you're going to want to spoon feed them the things that they want to feel. They're coming to the movie to feel a particular way. They are coming to a horror movie, a psychological thriller, a suspense. They are coming there to feel that emotion very specifically. So give it to them. Spoon feed it. Give it to them. And then tease them with it and then take it back. Tease them with it and take it back. It's a huge thing for a film composer. So next week we're going to get into Angry, and this one's going to kind of run along the same lines of Fearful, where it's really dependent upon the character that you are writing for in that particular instance, or that situation that the character was in like 5 scenes ago or 6 scenes ago or whatever. So take that in mind, and we're going to get into Angry next week, and we only have a few more weeks left. We have got 4 more weeks of this, and so we have Angry, Disgusted, Sad, and Happy to go. And Happy, we may end up spending 2 weeks on, as I've got I got a project that that's coming up on a deadline, so I may break this one into 2 categories. And sometimes we have a magic sounding category, which I'm not going to even get into that. And you have Happy, think Disney. I know this week we're doing that Disney, that logo theme, so that's pretty cool. So that's always Happy, or typically Happy. Yeah, so if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And if you have any suggestions for a future series or future videos, we're going to get ready to wind this down. And so I know we have at least 5 weeks of videos planned, where we have Angry first coming up next week. We have Disgusted in 2 weeks. We have Sad 3 weeks, Happy in 4 weeks. And then we have a special where I'm going to be working with Kevin Simon. We're going to be doing a composition, a screencast where he just asked me questions, and he was the winner of a competition we had a couple of weeks ago. It's in celebration of our 4,000th member. So stay tuned for that, and look forward in the future. And if you guys, again, have any questions, feel free to ask myself or any of the admin on this page, and we will try to get to you as quickly as we can. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. Happy scoring, and be blessed.